Welcome to the Animated 100 list. My name's Josh Taylor. Today we're putting our second film on the list. The first one that came out was Chicken Little. You can watch that video from before. But today we're putting Adventures of Prince Achmed onto the list. The Animated 100 list is a way to look at films from all across time and all around the world in hopes to find the 100 best animated films of all time by scoring them, rating them, and putting them on the list. The Adventures of Prince Achmed is about a handsome prince who rides his flying horse to faraway lands and embarks on magical adventures based on 1001 Arabian Nights, and it includes him meeting a witch, meeting Aladdin, battling demons, and falling in love with a princess. It is the oldest animated film in existence. Back in the good old days of the silent film era, they weren't really keen on preservation like they are today, and so film strips are rather flammable, cells, etc. People threw away things. So even though there were many animated films prior to Snow White, there's not many still left. And so this is the full-length feature animated film, the oldest full-length feature animated film from 1926. It's 65 minutes long, and because there were no MPAA ratings at that time, there is no rating for this. This is an NR rated film. Or I guess if you really had to call it, it's probably a G-rated film. Before I get into talking more about the Adventures of Prince Achmed, I want to talk about last week's video, Chicken Little, and all the comments that you guys gave. Amazingly, whether you were for or against Chicken Little, your own personal story about Chicken Little, and the comments that you gave talking about movies you'd love to add to this list. I bring that up because the third film that we're going to talk about later in this video, that's going to be a tease for the next one, is a comment-selected film. So truly, leave your comments down below of the movies that you would love to see on the list. I will be picking them out more and more often. I don't want to pick out any of the movies on this list. I want it to be completely community driven, whether it's from guests that come on and talk about the films that they want to talk about, or from the comments down below. I will be picking them out, talking about them, watching them, and putting them on the list every other week. So with that being said, we're going to jump into our rating system for the Adventures of Prince Achmed. If you don't know, or if you didn't watch the last one, there are 5 scoring bits that we're going to talk about here. That is animation, story, characters, sound and music, and the historical and cultural context of the film. In the last video, I only picked a few things to go over extensively, and I kind of want to make that a habit for these videos. So the few things that I want to jump into here quickly and just get them out of the way. First, let's talk about the sound and music. It has none. There's no dialogue, there's no score to this film, even though in the previous video for Chicken Little, and even in this video, I'll leave links to a scored version of the film. Back in the silent film days, you would either create your own score as a musician for a film, or you would get sheet music sent to you that would provide something to play, whether you were a piano player or an orchestra or whatever. But there are a ton of different scores that either go along with this film or what people just wanted to play in the background with this movie. So whether you decided to play the score that I selected, or if you decided to put on an NSYNC album or whatever the case might be, maybe you just sat there in silence and watched it, I have to rate this a 0 because the sound and music just doesn't exist. Not to the fault of the film, but just of the time period. It doesn't exist, so already a 0 out of 10 for sound and music. Because it's the silent film era, most films during this time are fairly simple to get because you don't have the dialogue or much dialogue because you just have the subtitled text boxes. And these were films that played in Europe or in Africa, in Asia, in America. So they had to be a bit more universal. And because this is based on Arabian Nights, you're going to get some of the same story beats that you might see in something like Aladdin or a variation of any of those types of tales. There's a good, there's an evil, good fights evil, good wins. The benefit of watching a silent film is that in 65 minutes, this story does move rather quickly. So the story elements that pop up because you see Prince Achmed meet a bunch of different people throughout the course of the film, and eventually have to fight off the evil sorcerer by the end. I think that this is a fast-paced, fun watch that was actually really interesting to watch, and as we talk about the animation, we'll get into that. But the final score that I gave this one for the story was a 5 out of 10. It's nothing too exciting, but it is fast-paced and easy to watch. It's a story that feels familiar enough that even without the context of the dialogue or the musical score, I totally understood it. As far as the characters themselves, I fell in love with this idea of Prince Achmed flying around on a horse, but because these are silhouetted characters, and because it's a silent film, you don't get a lot of personality from these characters. And the things that I do think are great about these characters are a little few and far between. There are some great details in the design of these characters, but unfortunately, going into our historical context, they do come off as a bit stereotyped, characterized, and even racist to some extent. So I ended up giving character a 2 out of 10 on this one. But let's jump into the historical and cultural context of this film, because there's a lot of importance that I think is based around these characters, which is the fact that these silhouetted characters were made in Germany and meant to look more Middle Eastern, North African, and in some instances Asian, and those things all come off looking a bit bad. You can definitely tell the character designs from who's handsome or ugly, who's pretty, who's old, who's young, and I love that aspect of it. But the Jewish stereotypes, the Asian stereotypes, the more Middle Eastern stereotypes of this are just not favorable to it. And not to say that The Adventures of Prince Achmed was the only, animated film or animated short to do that. There was a ton of that during the time. I'm not going to forgive it, but I'm just going to put that to the side for now and say that that existed. And it's one of the reasons why it's probably going to get docked a few more points than it probably should, considering it is the oldest animated feature film in existence. Not only is it the oldest, but it was also made by the first female director in animation, female director, writer, creator in animation. Lotte Reiniger, prior to 1926, was making a ton of silhouetted shorts just like this, and this was the feature film that she decided to create. There was a female artist in animation, directing, writing, creating, long before the Disney Animation Company or anybody in the US, frankly, put women more at the helm of animation. The other great thing about this is that it uses not the multi-plane camera, but basically a variation on that style of camera, being able to add different layers and textures to the frame. And so because of that use of a multi-plane camera style, not inventing it, but basically helping it become mainstream, not only in Europe, but around the world, along with Works and other people that were using it in animation. For the historical and cultural aspect of this film, I did give it a 8 out of 10. I probably would have given it a 10 out of 10 had it not been for the stereotypes, and I even thought about docking it even more points because of that, but I feel like its historical aspect of it, I have to separate the art from the artist, and I have to kind of look at this as a genuine piece of history more than anything else, so it's getting an 8. But I want to talk about the animation in depth because I think that this is, for its time period, an excellent animated film. The way that these silhouettes are created was by using and cutting cardboard and putting them against a lit backdrop. The greatness about this animated film, because it was made in color, even though color didn't exist in film yet, was the ability to create backgrounds in different colors, allowing us as the viewer to know when we were moving from scene to scene. Different places have different colors so that we know without dialogue or without any sound that we've moved to a different place, which I think is fantastic. And cutting out these cardboard pieces, each scene feels like it only gets more and more elaborate. The things that move become more and more insane to look at. And so just from an artistic aspect, I think it's absolutely gorgeous. To be able to see the clouds in the background as Prince Achmed is flying over, and they're a little bit less prominent, a little more faded than the upfront characters, or you get to see him in a room with a bunch of other women, and you get to see the palace back behind him in a bit of a fade so that it doesn't take away too much from the characters in the foreground. You also get to see a reflection in the water and its movement in the water. And if you go back and you were to look before films and see some of these kind of silhouetted puppetry, right? You would have like a campfire with a sheet in front of it and you would be able to move silhouetted puppets around. That was all live action, right? This film is shot frame by frame, so it has that ability to add those water textures or different movements because it's not in live action, which I think is the beauty of animation, even way back in 1926. You can also see its influence in this film. Of course, there's Aladdin here, and I feel like there's a portion in this movie where you see Aladdin going into the Cave of Wonders, and even though it's not Jafar, you see the sorcerer basically saying some of the same things that you hear him say, Jafar say to Aladdin, and it felt like it was just ripped right from this film. There's also a fight sequence in this movie between the sorcerer and the witch where they transform into all kinds of different animals that feels almost like the fight scene from The Sword and the Stone. So this feels like it was a heavy influence on Disney Animation and other animation companies in the US long before they were making feature films. And I can't help to think that people in animation got their hands on this and were very excited about the prospect of what feature animation could look like. So its animation, gorgeous, its influence can't be denied. For me, I had to give the animation here a perfect 10 out of 10. I thought it was fantastic. That brings the final score of this film to 25 out of a possible 50. Looking at the list, that means that The Adventures of Prince Achmed overtakes Chicken Little, and we're succeeding in our goal to find 100 movies better than Chicken Little. I really loved watching this, and if you actually enjoyed watching it, I've been on kind of a silent film kick. I'm willing to give those recommendations out to people if you're interested. I'm interested in hearing your recommendations for the movies that should go onto this list. And also, if you didn't know, we've got a Discord server, which is basically like a giant group chat for the 100 animated list and for Modern Mouse in general. So if you're interested in joining, talking to me and talking to other people about the movies that are on the list, or movies that could be featured on the list, or the videos that are going up all the time here on Modern Mouse, I would love to see you in the Discord. Just click the link in the description box down below. And speaking of Discord, I told them all that the third film that we were going to be talking about was the first ever comment selected film. I ended up getting a comment about it, and so I decided to choose it. It is the late 90s film, The Rugrats Movie. You know, The Rugrats from Nickelodeon. They had a movie. Actually, they had several movies, but the very first film, and we're going to talk about that in depth in 2 weeks on the next edition of the Animated 100 list. So check that out, and again, join the Discord. I might give some sneak peeks as to what the next movie will be after that. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. Go check out Adventures of Prince Achmed if you haven't, and I'll see you all really soon for more movies, hopefully better than Chicken Little.